The Oakland Aviation Museum in Oakland, California celebrates Black aviation pioneers. Here are the stories of a few African Americans who have made historic achievements in U.S. military and civil aviation to date. Emory Malek. Emory Malek was a pioneer aviator from central Pennsylvania. He became the first licensed black aviator by obtaining his pilot's license from the Curtis Flying School on March 20th, 1912. Eugene Jacques Bullard. Born in Columbus, Georgia in 1895, Eugene Bullard traveled to France to work as an entertainer and a boxer. When World War I broke out, he fought for France and became a decorated infantryman before training as a pilot. He received his license in 1917. He fought in more than 20 combat missions before becoming a prominent nightclub owner in France after the war, where he performed with Louis Armstrong and Josephine Baker. Bessie Coleman. Bessie Coleman was the first African-American and American woman pilot and the first woman to earn an international pilot's license on June 15, 1921. She did so by taking 2 jobs and teaching herself French so that she could travel to France to learn, since no one in the U.S. would teach her how to fly because of her gender and her race. She was best known for performing flying tricks as a barnstormer. Bessie was nicknamed Brave Bessie and Queen Bess. In 1923, Bessie received an invitation from the Coast Tire and Rubber Company in East Oakland, California, to come out to Oakland to endorse their products. She became the first African American to do such an endorsement. With the money she made from appearing in these ads, she purchased a World War I-era biplane and opened a flight school at the Oakland airport. After surviving an accident in an air show in Los Angeles that made her unable to fly herself, she took up performing as a wing walker and a stunt parachutist. In 1995, she was commemorated with a U.S. postage stamp, and in 2001, she became one of the great historical Americans featured on a $1 coin. As a tribute to her work in California, the Port of Oakland named the main road into the Oakland International Airport Bessie Coleman Boulevard. William J. Powell. Powell was an American engineer, soldier, and civil aviator, and he was an author who helped pave the way for African Americans getting into aviation. During the 1920s, Powell led a small group of African American air enthusiasts by establishing the Bessie Coleman Flying Club and sponsored the first all-black air show in 1929. Cornelius Coffey and Willa Brown. Cornelius Coffey was the first African-American aviator who had both a pilot's and a mechanic's license. He was also one of the first to found a non-university affiliated flight school. With his wife and fellow aviator, Willa Brown, Coffey established the Coffey School of Aeronautics in Illinois, where they trained many black pilots, including a significant number of people who would become the Tuskegee Airmen. Willa Brown was an American activist, lobbyist, and teacher herself, and she became the first African-American woman to earn a pilot license, as well as a commercial pilot's license, in the United States. In 1931, the Challenger Air Pilots Association, organized by John C. Robinson, who's on the far right, spearheaded the construction of the Robbins, Illinois airstrip, the first airport built for and by Black Americans. James Banning. In 1926, James Banning became one of the first African-American pilots in history. In 1932, Banning became the first black aviator to fly coast to coast with his mechanic Thomas Allen. Banning made the 3,300-mile trip from Los Angeles to Long Island, New York in 41 hours and 27 minutes. The Tuskegee Airmen. The Tuskegee Airmen, active between 1941 and 1948, had a lot to prove to the country and the rest of the world as the first black military pilots in the U.S. Armed Forces. Their heroic missions, escorting heavy bomber aircraft and conducting successful air-to-ground attack missions in 1945, earned them distinguished honors and helped bring about the desegregation of the U.S. military. Prior to 1940, African Americans were barred from flying for the U.S. military, but civil rights organizations, coupled with the black press, as well as the First Lady, Eleanor Roosevelt, exerted pressure that resulted in the formation of an all-African-American aircraft pursuit squadron based in Tuskegee, Alabama in 1941. 450 pilots were trained and served overseas in either the 99th Pursuit Squadron, later the 99th Fighter Squadron, or the 332nd Fighter Group, known as the Red Tails for their distinctively painted red tails on their P-51 Mustangs. Benjamin Davis Jr. Benjamin O. Davis Jr. was a pioneering military officer and was a flight leader of the Tuskegee Airmen during World War II. He was the first African American to become a 3-star general in the U.S. Air Force. After retiring from the Air Force in 1970, General Davis supervised the Federal Sky Marshal program designed to quell airliner hijackings. President Bill Clinton later awarded General Davis his 4th star in 1998, promoting him to the rank of full general. Ensign Jesse Brown. On October 21, 1948, at the age of 22, Brown became the first African-American man to complete Navy flight training. A public information officer released this photograph, which appeared in Life magazine. He was flying a Vought F-4U-4 Corsair off of the USS Wright on the 4th of December 1950 during the Korean War. On the way to Chosin Reservoir, he was shot down and had to crash land his Corsair on the side of a mountain in the snow. His wingman, Lieutenant J.G. Thomas Hunter, realized something was wrong when Brown didn't get out of the cockpit, and so his wingman decided to crash land his own Corsair next to his, and this actually caused him to risk court-martial because his commanding officer had said, if a plane goes down, that's one down, we don't need any Hollywood stuff. Ironically, the story was made into the 2022 movie Devotion, based on the 2015 book. Marlon Dewitt Green. In 1963, Marlon Green, an Arkansas-born former U.S. Air Force pilot, broke the airline industry color barrier when he sued Continental Airlines, and the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that airlines had to comply with anti-discrimination laws. Green became the first black pilot hired by a regularly scheduled commercial passenger airline. He flew for almost 14 years, all of them for Continental, before retiring in 1978. As a result of his breaking the airline color barrier, he opened the doors for hundreds of other minority pilots, and the Organization of Black Airline Pilots was formed as a result of his victory. David Harris. David Harris was the first African-American commercial pilot hired by American Airlines, and the first to be promoted to the rank of captain. Harris flew for the airline for 30 years before retiring in December 1994. Captain Bill Norwood. William Ronald Norwood from Centralia, Illinois, served in the U.S. Air Force from 1959 to 1965, flying primarily the B-52 bomber. Bill retired from United Airlines as a DC-10 captain after an outstanding 31-year career. But still today in the United States, only about 2% of commercial pilots are black. Robert Lawrence. Born in Chicago in 1935, Robert Lawrence graduated from Bradley University at age 20 with a chemistry degree. He would go on to serve as an Air Force officer and a skilled pilot, logging 2,500 hours and flying in 2,000 jets. In 1965, he earned his PhD in physical chemistry from Ohio State University, and 2 years later, he was chosen by the Air Force to take part in the Manned Orbiting Laboratory program. Lawrence became the first black astronaut selected to a national space program, and the only member with a doctorate. He helped develop the space shuttle, but tragically, he died as a passenger during a test flight of a supersonic jet, so he never made it into space. That honor would go to Guy Bluford. Born in Philadelphia in 1942, Bluford served in the U.S. Air Force as an officer and a pilot before joining NASA in 1978. With multiple degrees in aerospace engineering, Bluford became the first black person in space as a crew member of the Space Shuttle Challenger in 1983. Bluford would go on to serve in 3 other Space Shuttle missions until 1993. Commander Donnie Cochran. Donnie Cochran was one of the first black F-14 Tomcat pilots. In September of 1985, he was the first African-American pilot selected to fly with the United States Navy's demonstration squadron known as the Blue Angels. In July 1994, he became the first African-American commanding officer and flight leader of the Blue Angels. Mae Jemison. Born in Alabama in 1956, Mae Jemison graduated from Stanford University with a chemical engineering degree in 1977, received her medical degree from Cornell Medical College 4 years later. After holding a brief medical practice, Jemison took time off to serve in the Peace Corps, which is when she discovered she was accepted into the NASA program. On September 12, 1992, Jemison became the first black woman in space as a member of the Space Shuttle Endeavour. She is currently a professor at Cornell University. Major Christina Hopper. Christina Hopper became the first African-American fighter pilot to face combat in a major war while serving for the U.S. Air Force in Iraq, flying an F-16 Fighting Falcon. She flew more than 50 combat sorties during the Iraq conflict, and she received 4 Air Medals and the Aerial Achievement Medal for her bravery. On February 12, 2009, Captain Rachel Jones-Kerr, First Officer Stephanie Grant, and Flight Attendants Robin Rogers and Diana Galloway became the first all-African-American female flight crew for Atlantic Southeast Airlines ASA Flight 5202 from Atlanta to Nashville. This historic flight came together at the last minute when Stephanie Grant stepped in after the original first officer called in sick. And then in 2021, Captain Tahira Brown and First Officer Deanna Lugemwa became the first black all-woman flight crew for a cargo plane for FedEx. Lieutenant General Richard Clark. Richard Clark became the first black superintendent of the U.S. Air Force Academy in September of 2020. Clark is a command pilot with more than 4,200 combined hours in the B-1 Lancer bomber, the KC-135 Stratotanker, the Learjet C-21, and many other aircraft. 400 of his flight hours have been earned in combat, and he received the Distinguished Flying Cross for extraordinary achievement and courage in the global war on terror. Thank you for watching. If you're living near or visiting the Oakland Airport, come visit us and see our great collection of military and civilian aircraft. For more information, visit oaklandaviationmuseum.org.